So the 90s are having a moment, and it's not just slouchy jeans and cropped cardigans. Saved by the Bell star Dustin Diamond recently passed away, and the big question, was he or was he not married? Common law marriage, it's a thing. Let's dive in. Welcome back to #Lawyered, y'all. You have Austin and of course me, your favorite legal A team, back for more.
Yep, sticking with the family law theme, 2 weeks in a row.
Family law theme, yes. There's so many stories in family law.
There's a lot.
And many nuances.
I said this right before we came on the air, common law marriage to me is one of the most fun topics to talk about because there's so many misconceptions.
Oh yeah.
It's a weird area of the law because it's like all of a sudden it happens and then you can't actually get divorced until you get a divorce. It's not you just break up, but then it could have happened but not challenged, therefore maybe it never existed. It's just a crazy area.
And then you have to start talking to all these people and you have all these witnesses in a trial.
A lot of drama.
Oh, it's so much drama. I mean, we should make a movie about this.
We could.
Not this particular
short film, maybe. Yeah.
Short film.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But not claymation. That thing
No,
claymation freaks me out.
That's weird. That's strange.
Yeah, I think so too. Anyway, so like we were saying earlier in the introduction, Dustin Diamond, who played Samuel Screech Powers in the popular like late 80s, early 90s sitcom Saved by the Bell, recently passed away very tragically due to stage 4 lung cancer in February 2021. Yeah. Very sad. So he had his then girlfriend with him, Tash, when he passed away. But there's a twist to the story. And the twist is, everyone knew he was married to Jennifer Misner, right?
I didn't, but I know now.
Okay, well, you kind of live under a pop culture rock sometimes.
Now, to be fair, hold on. We talked about this a little bit. This show, and this is the one time I get to actually talk about this show being older than me, because this is actually my cousin, who's 4.5 years older than me. This is one of her favorite shows. I was still watching cartoons and stuff at this point.
Oh,
so
okay.
I knew who Screech was, but that's just because my cousin wouldn't let me have the remote, and I had to watch that show for, Saved by the Bell for a little bit.
I see. So you were preferring to watch Tom and Jerry.
For sure, but Christiane wouldn't let me because she was all into the Saved by the Bell.
There you go. So the twist is that was he or was he not actually married to Jennifer Misner? So here's the thing, is that Dustin Diamond wore a wedding band. He called Jennifer his wife publicly. And his Wikipedia page even said that they got married in 2009 and then separated in like 2013.
If Wikipedia says it, then write it off.
It has to be true, right?
We're in this. It's like what Michael Scott says about it on The Office. He says, Wikipedia, anybody can just go on there and post anything. It's one of the most trustworthy sources in the internet.
It's crowdsourced information, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyhow, so, he says all these things. He wears the wedding band. And then they separated, not divorced, separated in 2013. So let's remember this phrase, separated. And who broke the story? Credit goes to TMZ, which I just recently found out after reading the unauthorized biography of Kris Jenner, literally the title of the book. TMZ, I think, was started by a lawyer.
It makes sense when you think about it, because they flirt with the lines, but don't go over them,
I'm always very impressed. I was like, they must have a good legal team. So, but yeah, TMZ broke the story on March 8th, 2021, that according to Diamond's death certificate, he was never married. And so, Wikipedia fans, you're going to be disappointed because it lied to you that he was married, or did it? Or did it lie?
Well, and I guess that's the question is, okay, if his death certificate says he was never married, what that's really saying, I guess, is he was never formally married.
Which is a big deal because in Texas, we have what's called common law marriage, or technically, I think it's called informal marriage.
Right. Common law I think it sounds cooler.
Common law sounds cooler. Yeah. By statute in Texas, it's called informal marriage, but we'll get into that later. So the big deal here, right, is that he did all these things, he made all these representations that Jennifer was his wife, so he arguably could have been common law married.
Right.
Which, that's interesting, and why does that matter? Especially if you live in a community property state like Texas or California.
If you are common law married, you are treated the same way as if you were formerly married. Therefore, you get all the rights that come with enjoying the community estate. So all the property that would be normally divided in a divorce, in a big nasty, crazy divorce through a normal marriage. When I say normal, a marriage with a certificate, an officiant, all those things, and a license.
Like licensed through the state.
Right. Your typical formal marriage that everybody thinks of. You're entitled to community property. Well, guess what? If you can prove you were common law married to that person, you're also entitled to that community property just as if you were formerly married.
Which is wild to some people.
It is, and it's especially a big deal when you're talking about a celebrity who maybe has a lot of wealth and assets and all those types of things. And that's typically where you see that fight pop up, is there's something worth fighting over. And so now we're going to push this common law marriage idea.
So we mentioned that California and Texas are community property states, and I'm just going to run down the list for our listeners.
Sure.
So there are 9 total community property states. You have Washington, Idaho, California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Wisconsin, and apparently people in Alaska can opt into community property.
I want to read more about that because that sounds interesting to me.
I feel like there's more there.
I mean, because it sounds like basically, you can have a premarital agreement or a prenup, like we talked about in previous episodes, which opts you out of community property in these states. It's kind of like Alaska's saying, well, no, we're not going to do that. You can opt in. That's interesting. So I want to look at that.
Very intriguing. So Alaska lawyers, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you practice in Alaska, let us know. I'm curious.
All 6 of you? I don't know.
Oh my gosh. All right. So very briefly, Austin, we've touched on this before, but let's touch on again. Community property versus separate property. Why does it matter? Go.
Separate property, anything you had before the marriage stays yours after the marriage is over through death, divorce, or whatever. Anything that is generated during the marriage, any assets, any cash, any properties purchased, that's community property. The 2 spouses share 50-50 typically in the value of those assets.
Sure. And then the death, devise, gift.
Right.
If you obtain property through one of those methods during the marriage, it's your separate property.
Right. So grandpa, through his will, leaves you the family ranch. That stays your separate property, even though you received it during the marriage, because it's an exception carved out whenever it's given to you through death from your grandfather.
Awesome. And we actually might do a episode that really delves into that if you're so interested, y'all. So anyway, what I found was interesting when I was researching is that Diamond actually had a home in Port Washington, Wisconsin before relocating to Florida, where he passed away.
Okay.
So Wisconsin is a community property state. So I think that's interesting. I don't know if he married Jennifer while he was living in Wisconsin, but so maybe they could be in a community property situation.
Potentially, yeah.
Which is intriguing. But, let's go ahead and swing this around because there are a lot of myths surrounding what common law marriage is, how you get into it. You have to be married for so many years, people think. Okay, we're here to dispel all of that. Yeah. All of it is going away. So we're going to get down to basics because I love rules. Rules are my friend. And so what is common law marriage in the state of Texas? There are 3 elements according to section 2.401 of the Texas Family Code. And those elements are, 1, you have to agree to be married, right?
Yep.
You have to, after this agreement, live together in this state as husband and wife. We're going to put an asterisk there. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then you have to represent to others that y'all are married.
So the funniest part that's missing there, that everybody always, the biggest myth that I deal with, and that we all deal with in common law marriage, no time limit. There's no time requirement. No. You can live together for that long. And the point that's important is that it's at that point in time when all 3 of these elements are met.
Yes.
Once that occurs, you are common law married.
Like it could occur within the span of 5 minutes.
Right. It could.
Which is wild.
It is
to
wild.
People.
It is wild. And we're going to break down, these sound simple, they're not.
They're not. No, there's a lot of evidence that goes into it.
That's where all the drama comes in. But yeah, once you hit that point in time, you are common law married. You are not able to get a divorce. Or you're not able to just break up the person. You have to get a formal divorce at that point.
Because that's something I think people don't really understand is that while there's common law marriage, there's no common law divorce.
No common law divorce.
You have to go through a straight up formal divorce. It costs money. Lawyers, you have to get a divorce decree.
Yeah. You got to go hire Ryan Siegel from our last episode.
Yeah, go hire Ryan. He's cool. And so, so be careful.
Yeah.
Be very careful. So let's, Austin, let's go ahead and walk through each of these elements because I think people need to understand each of them. But first, I want to address that little, I don't know why I'm doing this X with my hands. I think I'm trying
It's hard to do the asterisk with all,
with
just
all the
lot.
fingers, asterisk, whatever. Anyway, so the asterisk was the fact that for the second element, where after the agreement, the couple has to live in Texas as husband and wife. So the Supreme Court of the United States in Obergefell versus Hodges, quite recently, it was the case that essentially legalized gay marriage. Texas has not amended the statute to take that into account yet, but Texas recognizes same-sex marriages.
Right.
So common law marriage doesn't only apply to heterosexual couples. It also applies to same-sex couples.
Right.
And that won't be an issue.
Sure.
It shouldn't be an issue in any Texas court.
Right. It won't.
Yeah.
And I think another threshold issue that's good to point out before we dive into the elements, you got to think about, and this is important for our listeners to understand, at the time when these elements are being analyzed, they're being analyzed in court, because what's happening is the court's trying to determine, was there a common law marriage? Yeah. So this means that maybe this I don't know if you want to call it an epiphany, but this moment happened where all three elements occurred. This could have happened 5, 10, 15 years ago, and then now it's being challenged in court because one person wants a share of the community estate, they want a share of the assets, or say one of the other people, they're trying to get formally married now, and then this person's coming out of the woodwork saying, well, no, we have to get divorced. We were common law married. So that's important because the context of the two sides being opposed to one another, the fact that one side's going to say that he said this, and then she's going to say, or he's going to say she said this, it's going to make these elements so much harder to prove because you're doing it in court with an adversarial situation. And so I just want everybody to understand the context, that this isn't like okay, we happen in this moment and there's some legal fiction that occurs back here. It's like, well, no, we're analyzing it years later in open court about stuff that happened however long ago, and you've got to rely on testimony. So it gets wild.
It is. Gosh. Okay. So let's hit all these elements, shall we? So agreed to be married. Austin, what's that?
The two parties between themselves had an agreement to be married. I said to her, I want you to be my wife. She says, I want you to be my husband. Boom, we've hit that one element. And what's really important here, right? And this is super critical. Agreement to be married, it sounds like a proposal, right? So when Spencer proposed to me, right, it was beautiful. It was in this park. There were lights and furniture, and it was freaking fairy tale. I helped break down the scenery afterwards.
Yes, thank you, Austin. I really appreciate it. So Spencer, of course, asked me, would I marry him? And I said, yes, Spencer, I will marry you, of course. Okay, I agreed to eventually be married, but at that point in time, I did not agree to be his wife right then and there.
Right.
So
Big distinction.
Is a huge distinction. Engagement is not the same thing as an agreement to be married.
And see, to me, engagement, I've told my clients before, if you are engaged or there's an engagement ring, that's actually a better sign against this first element because of what you just said. And
I actually, I had a case where that came up. I represented the claimant who was, the alleged common law wife, and it came up in discovery that the decedent, the alleged common law husband, had been working with a jeweler to create this beautiful diamond solitaire ring. And I looked at that and I was like, hot dang, that looks like a very nice engagement ring. Beautiful, stunning, looks like an engagement ring. And that really, I thought, was evidence of, I don't think at least he thought y'all weren't married.
And you got to have both parties agree.
And you have to have both parties agree.
Right.
So that's critical. They have to agree in that moment that they are at this moment husband and wife, or husband and husband, wife and wife, or non-binary individual with non-binary individual.
Right. All those things. Exactly.
All those things.
Yeah, but they have to both, it's in that moment, like you said.
In that moment. If you're outside the Domino's at 3 a.m. and you've had an amazing dinner of like pizza and Coca-Cola, and you said, this is my life's dream. We're married right now. Yay. Then there you go.
You hit the first one.
You hit the first one.
Got to hit the second too, though.
Yeah, you got to hit number 2. All right, so element number 2. So after that agreement, right, in your Domino's parking lot, that...
I'm glad we're going with this analogy because there's so many different tangents and things we can go off with it. So let's keep going.
Okay. So after this agreement, the couple has to live together in Texas as husband and wife, or caveat, husband, wife, and wife, whatever, just as a couple, as spouses.
The two partners need to live together.
Yeah. All right. And let's break that down. You have to actually live together.
You have to actually live together, and like you said, there's not a time requirement.
No,
and so
it could be a day.
Right, it could. And so let's go with Jane and Jimmy here. Jimmy, after a night out at Domino's at 3 a.m, says, I want you to be my wife right now. I want us to be married right now. Jane says yes, and then they go home to the apartment that they actually co-lease, that she's, or she didn't even have to be on the lease. That's the other thing, is that it's not a requirement. That's a thing you can throw into evidence and try to use as cross-examination, whatever. But they go home and they live together after they've made that agreement. I mean, they've met the element, right?
They've met element number 2 now. Now they're living together, whether her name's on the lease or not.
Right.
It's, if you talk to witnesses, if you look at where she's been spending the night, you talk to the doorman, she's been living there. Element number 2 is met.
Right. Absolutely. And like you said, it's after the 3 a.m.
Yeah.
I almost call it a proposal. It's not a proposal.
No.
It's after the 3 a.m. decision.
The decision, the agreement. All right. Element number 3, that they represented to others that they were married. And that is very important, right? So now this very personal decision that you made at 3 a.m. in the Domino's parking lot is now going to be dissected for the entire world to see, because maybe you all agreed you were married, but if it didn't appear to others within the state of Texas that you were married, now there's a problem.
Yeah.
So Jane and Jimmy, are going to have to represent to others that they were married. So if Jimmy goes around just saying, oh, my girlfriend Jane, and Jane's going around saying, oh, my husband Jimmy, well, you don't have a very good case there.
Right. There's going to be conflicting evidence.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things that I've seen a lot is, say you've got healthcare benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Someone signed up as the spouse on the healthcare benefits. That's representing to the company that we are married. Tax returns, usually married filing separately or jointly. Any types of thing. I mean, and it can go in any types of. It can come in any type of way. Medical
disclosures. If you mark, next of kin, or if you mark, so and so can receive my health information. Maybe you are going in for a cancer treatment, and you are marking who can receive your records, or you're marking who to speak to if you slip into a coma or something, and you mark wife.
Yeah.
And then list that person. You are now representing to the hospital.
Right.
Everyone in that hospital that you're married to so and so.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's good to point out here is, we just listed off a couple of different types of ways you can represent somebody. It's not like you hit one or two of these and, okay, that's the ones you have to show. You could have, and I've seen it, you can have conflicting, okay, well, she was on his healthcare benefits, but he wasn't listed as her, but then on her bank account, he was listed as her spouse. So you can have this whole world is what the court's going to look at, and the court's going to weigh what's most credible, what's most believable. The jury or the judge, if it's a bench trial, but whichever one's making the determination is going to weigh the credibility of it and think, okay, well, is this credible? Is this not? And then figure out, okay, was this third element met? And then, again, were the first two met as well? And do they all happen at the same time?
Yeah. And so, again, I just want to hit on this. Like, there's this rumor that you have to live together for 3 or 5 years before you're common law married. It's just not true.
Nope, not true at all.
So, false, guys. Don't listen to those people. They're wrong.
And one of the things that's interesting, because we dealt with this in a probate matter not too long ago, you can have, there's times where someone's claiming they were common law married to a person, and then the other person doesn't believe they were common law married, not aware that their former spouse, or not former spouse, but that this other person is claiming this. They go get married.
Like formally
married, propose, get married, live together, whatever.
License from the state, which is clutch.
Right, right, exactly.
Critical.
And then this previous paramour comes back and says, well, no, that formal marriage, the actual wedding date is crap. We were married. You can't be married.
Because they never got a formal divorce.
Because they never got a formal divorce, right. That's what the claim is.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that in that scenario, the burden is already on the common law partner that's trying to claim they were common law married. There's a heightened burden. There's a presumption that this formal marriage is valid. And so
there you go.
It raises, probably the best way we can illustrate this is that it was already the common law marriage paramour's job to prove, beyond a preponderance of the evidence, more than 51%, that the common law marriage elements existed. They've met all 3 of them. Now, the court is already going to be predispositioned to give a little bit of an advantage to the formerly married spouse because of the fact that there was no legal record showing this common law marriage. There's just nothing there. That she's had to come back to the table now to prove all this stuff. And so that does shift the weight a little bit, which from a public policy standpoint makes a lot of sense, right?
I think so. It makes a lot of sense. So, all right, y'all, why is why is the possibility that Diamond was perhaps common law married to Jennifer a big deal? It's because she might be entitled to half his community property.
Exactly. And he probably has a decent sized estate. I assume. I don't know.
Who knows? But, you know, as we're all told in law school, I always clap when I think of this, but you've got the community property and it's divided upon death.
Yeah.
And so at that point, she would be entitled to probably around half or so of his community property, if this was in Texas, for example. Right. So let's go through a hypo in Texas, right? We've got young lovers. Jane is 18, Jimmy's 21. They're in love. Oh my gosh. And Jimmy's like, honey, I have to move all the way. So say they live in the Panhandle.
Sure.
Jimmy's like, I got this great finance job in Dallas. I got to move. And
he's going to move from Lubbock to Dallas. Perfect.
Okay, there we go. So what do? Jane's heartbroken. We're like, no, we can't be apart. And so they have a romantic 3 a.m. Domino's parking lot meal and decide that they are in love. They are married right then and there. They're soulmates, they're life partners, they're spouses. At that moment, they are married. And she's like, oh, okay, great. Well, then I'll just move with you and live with you in Dallas because I'm your wife. Okay, so that's cool. They, move to Dallas.
Yeah, 1 and 2 at that point.
1 and 2. Once she moves into the apartment in Dallas, and it's an apartment that has a doorman. This doorman is going to be important to our story. And we can call this doorman Ahmed. Can you say that?
No, I'm going to let you go with that one.
Okay, I'll
is
go
that
with
from
that.
the Puppets, what was that guy's name? Jeff Dunham.
No.
Yeah, he had a character named Ahmed.
No, I'm half Turkish, so that's the first kind of Turkish name that I think of, which is probably not good.
I'm getting us off topic.
All right, anyway, so Jane and Jimmy move in together, and over the next 3 months, Jane and Jimmy wear wedding bands. They refer to each other as spouses or husband and wife to their apartment neighbors, Ahmed the doorman, and they go to 6 different massive parties, and they introduce each other as my life partner, my spouse, my wife, my husband. Critical, okay? Remember all of this. And then Ahmed sees, the mail, right? He'll see that these packages are addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Jimmy. Or Jimmy will be coming in from work and Ahmed will be like, oh, how's the wife doing today? And Jimmy will say, oh, how's it going, Ahmed? My wife is doing great. She's redecorating the apartment. We're pretty pumped. Okay, well, now he's representing to the doorman. He's representing to people at the party. He's representing to their neighbors that he is married to Jane. And then Jane will come down with her girlfriends because they're going shopping for curtains, right? Because they're interior decorating. Ahmed will say, oh, how's the husband doing today? And Jane will say, oh, Jimmy's doing great, but you know how husbands are. He's a little worried about the checkbook with the curtains, so we gotta not go with the really nice damask silk where we gotta ratchet it back a little bit unless I can find a sale, favorite 4-letter word. And so there you go. Now you've got these representations.
Yeah.
Husband and wife. This is clutch. But ladies and gentlemen, here comes the drama. Heartbreak. After all this work to make the apartment a beautiful home, Jane walks in early from a shopping trip on Jimmy and the apartment leasing lady, who doesn't even need a name because she's being rude, making out on the couch.
Shocker, you made Jimmy the bad guy in this one, but go ahead.
I mean, it's basically like statistics. So Jane is heartbroken, and Jimmy's like, I'm not in love anymore. I can't do this. The curtains was too much for me. I couldn't handle the curtains. I don't love you anymore because of the curtains. So Jane, in tears, runs through the apartment, picks up all of her things, her shoes, her purses, her makeup, her jewelry.
So it sounds like it was more than the curtains, but okay.
Well, maybe so. But he's blaming the curtains.
Sure.
So she packs them all into her Louis Vuitton duffel bag and runs out the door in her Manolo Blahnik's tears, and Ahmed sees her, runs out, and he's like, Mrs. Jimmy, and she's like, don't call me by that name anymore, I can't do it. And Ahmed doesn't see her for 2 years. Jane and Jimmy don't talk for 2 years, and then 2 years on to the nose, is that the right phrase, to the nose? Whatever.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, so Jane moved back in with her parents, nursing her broken heart. She decides that she's going to be someone to empower women, and she goes into a career. She gets a wedding invite from Jimmy and the apartment leasing lady saying that they're getting married in 6 months. Can't wait to see you at the wedding. Okay, first of all, probably
tacky.
not.
Tacky.
Yeah, not tacky. Or definitely tacky, not tasteful.
Excuse me, you're right. That's what I meant. Tacky,
not tasteful, super tacky.
Yeah.
All right. So, but this has Jane thinking, wait a minute. They never got a divorce.
Right.
And, Jimmy got a big promotion because he might be a royal piece of poo when it comes to relationships, but the guy's good at what he does in terms of his finance job. He's making bank. I mean, they're living at the penthouse now, he and the apartment lease lady. I mean, they probably got a discount because of her, but We'll see. So, here's the thing. Can Jimmy marry the apartment leasing lady? Like, formally marry?
He can, unless Jane goes and files for divorce and kind of throws a wrench in everything. And now eventually, that's not going to prevent him from getting married to her once the divorce is finalized, but that's the way she exercises her rights, right? She files for divorce, says, I was common law married to Jimmy, and so I want half of his stuff. Basically, half of his stuff accrued during the marriage. And then the fight's going to be, did they meet these 3 elements? Jimmy's going to fight back and say, no, she doesn't get half of my retirement and pension plan or my stock options that I acquired 6 months ago while we were allegedly common law married. And that's what the fight's going to be over. And this is the exact scenario that this stuff comes up, where someone realizes, hey, I'm entitled to half of that because we were common law married, so I'm going to go assert my rights.
All right, so let's change up the scenario a little bit and say karma hits Jimmy, and the day before his wedding to apartment leasing lady, he's hit by a bus and dies, tragically, but not really. So now there's a probate matter.
Yep.
And Jane hears that he's dead, and she's like, well, I don't really feel sorry for him, but hey, I was married to him. What do I get? Because I suffered, I should get something. And girl, I don't blame you. I don't blame you one bit. So now what does she do?
Well, and we're assuming that he doesn't have a will, right? So,
and he died intestate because he was too busy making money.
Right, making money and hanging out with the leasing lady.
Yeah, and hanging out with the leasing lady.
So at that point, she's going to go and in the probate court try to get her share of his estate. And that we see it play out like that all the time, trying to prove the common law marriage in the probate matter, which is even more complicated because you don't have the other party there to testify about, did we make an agreement, did we hold ourselves out, all that kind of stuff.
It gets real complicated.
Big time.
So, what's the takeaway here, ladies and gentlemen? Be mindful of your representation to others about your relationships. And if you're going to move in with someone before you get married, just be careful how you represent to others. If you all of a sudden, maybe he gets you a promise ring, and apparently Craig did that on Southern Charm for Naomi. Didn't think that was still a thing, but that's cool. You guys, you do you, man. That's awesome. It was a really nice ring too, by the way. It was beautiful. But just, be careful, right? Because if they're living together and then maybe they're wearing a promise ring and then you just kind of casually start being like, you don't correct people's impression that y'all are married, and then you just kind of being like, oh yeah, my wife. And you start just kind of saying those things because maybe you're saving it for a big wedding day. Now things are getting a little muddy, and that could maybe be a problem.
Well, absolutely, because if you've done those second 2 things you just talked about, you live together, you've represented others. Well, think about that first element. We made an agreement to be married. That's only between the 2 of you. And so what is that going to look like in court? It's going to be he said, she said. If you're trying to claim there's not a common law marriage, but your partner or alleged partner has already hit the other 2 elements, honestly, deck's kind of stacked in their favor because the court's probably going to believe, well, if you were representing to everybody that she was your wife and you lived together, but now you're saying you didn't agree with her that she was your wife, I don't know if I'm going to believe you because look at all the evidence over here.
Yeah.
And so that first element, it's required, but your hypothetical, like you were kind of implying there, you can kind of landslide it if you get the second 2.
Yeah. So just be careful, y'all. Be very, very careful. Maybe get an agreement. I don't know. Maybe drop agreement, being like, we're roommates. We're not married right now. Type situation.
It's a wild scenario,
Yeah.
and professionally, it is fun to litigate those matters because you get into all these details, and you have to get real creative on how do we couch this, how do we frame this, and like you said, it is a lot of drama in the courtroom.
It is a lot of drama, which leads me to my last little sign off before we go here. So in last week's episode, I mentioned that I almost kind of sort of made a cameo on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and here's the thing, very almost tenuous connection, but I actually had a common law marriage case, and it went to trial, and it was one of my most fun cases to try because it was so interesting, and it allowed room for so much creativity, and it was just, and there was great people, right? Great people involved. The client was amazing. The family and friends were amazing. It was just a great case to work on, great people. One of the people who wanted to show up and support the claimant was Kris Jenner.
Oh, wow.
And so she had communicated to the claimant that she wanted to show her support for her because this was a really difficult time and she wanted to be there for her. Ultimately, Kris Jenner did not wind up coming because we thought that the optics might be a little bad when you're in Dallas County.
Right. And you've got a celebrity coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were like, well, maybe let's just keep it to family, right? So Kris Jenner didn't come, but that was my almost brush.
You almost brush
with the Kardashians, because secretly I was like, oh my gosh, how cool would that be to be in the same room as Kris Jenner?
Right. That would have been pretty cool.
That would have been
I can
so
even
cool.
appreciate that.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my almost moment with the Kardashians. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to #Lawyered, and I hope you enjoyed this expose of common law marriage. Till next time.
Guys, thanks for listening. Closing arguments are coming up, but make sure before you go rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast anywhere that you listen to your podcast. Check us out on YouTube, and you can check us out on Instagram and talk to us, tell us what you want to hear about. You can search us at #Lawyered, spelled out. You can talk to Andrea at andrea.s.turner, and you can talk to me at The Dallas Lawyer. See y'all again soon.
So, Burger King made a very interesting tweet on International Women's Day, which was, women belong in the kitchen. Say what? Okay, back that up. So actually, Burger King was trying to highlight the disparity in chef positions in American kitchens and how very few head chefs, I think about 7%, are actually women in the restaurant industry. And they were trying to highlight a scholarship that they had to help support women seeking positions as chefs. Now, could Burger King have gone about it a much better way? Yes. Can you get any legal action against Burger King for their extremely chauvinistic sounding statement? Nope, free speech. Till next time.